Götterdämmerung, of course, is an experience that is tinged with extremely strong emotions. For me, one of the great powerful emotions in Götterdämmerung is regret. As moving, as overwhelming, as earth-shattering, as life-changing as hearing the ring, as witnessing the ring, as seeing the ring is and should be and was intended to be, and Götterdämmerung is absolutely the crown of it, the conclusion of it, in a way, the motivation, the denouement of the whole thing. Nevertheless, I always feel sad, not just sad because of losing almost all the characters. Interestingly enough, this is an aside, but a significant one. I feel much less sad, in a way, by the death of Siegfried or Brunhilde than I do by the death further back in the story, for instance, of Siegmund. That one always really gets to me. But that has to do, I think, with the nature of the whole tragedy, the nature of the whole story. But there's the regret that it's over. This wonderful, unique, absolutely unlike anything else that we do in our lives is over, this whole ring. And so there's a kind of a feeling. So let's all enjoy it and hold on to it and make as much of it as we can. And I think that this has a lot to do with Wagner's own approach to Götterdämmerung. Because for Wagner, as well as for us, the composition of the ring was this unique lifetime adventure. Indeed, Wagner spent 26 years of his life. I think no other work of art by anybody is comparable in terms of not just the size, the scope, the length, but the significance to the artist. It was over such an incredible span. And it wasn't begun as some young project when he was just starting out his career. No, it was begun after the success of Tannhäuser and Lohengrin. And he had been for many years the Kapellmeister in a very important theater in Dresden. So the beginning of the ring came when Wagner was already very established. And of course he finished it many, many years, 26 years later, in a completely different place in his life, in a different place in his philosophical outlook, and very different place as a composer. So how is, and this is sort of the focus of my talk, although I'm mostly going to focus on the immolation scene, how does the ring end? How is Götterdämmerung, the experience of hearing Götterdämmerung, of seeing Götterdämmerung, encapsulate and manifest for us the sense of the end, the crown, the conclusion, the end point, where it's all heading, and to some extent the explanation, the denouement, what it all has been about, what it all means. And also how, in that respect, is Götterdämmerung different from the rest of the ring? I think to start with the difference from the rest of the ring, I'd like to spend a little bit of time before then I go to the immolation scene, which is also, I think, very different from the rest of the ring. There are many differences in Götterdämmerung from the rest of the ring that hit us immediately in the face. For instance, Götterdämmerung is the only ring opera that has a very prominent role for the chorus. I mean, you could call the Valkyries a chorus, I guess, in a way, but in Götterdämmerung, the chorus is important. It's the only one of the ring operas that takes place in a very specifically, explicitly human society. And we see, these sort of more or less normal people, the Gibichungs, in a kind of normal life along the Rhine. It's very much a departure from the magical, mythological world of the rest of the ring. And indeed, going back and forth between the scenes, one of the reasons I think where the musical interludes are always quite long between the magical part still, the Norn scene and the opening duet, which are in the realm of the sort of magical god, fairy world, the first three works, and then the Gibichung scenes. And then going back to Brunhilde's Rock, there's this long interlude, which also helps emphasize this long space between these worlds. So Götterdämmerung definitely inhabits a different kind of world, and I think makes a big statement about that at the end, sort of uniting these two worlds. In the final scene when Valhalla is burning, and the Rhine is overflowed, and the Rhinedanes have taken back their gold, and all that's left is really the human world, I think there's definitely a point being made there about the eternal fairy-like, perhaps imaginary, if you want to call it that, mythological world and the more concrete real world. I'd like, however, to concentrate on how Götterdämmerung is musically different from the rest of the ring. And I think one of the chief ways it's musically different, one of the ways which is easiest to pinpoint in any case, is in its use of motivic material. Motives, leitmotifs, and their role, function, and meaning in the ring is a very important and yet very elusive subject. Elusive because I think it's so often been misunderstood, and there's so much material which confirms our misunderstanding of it. And the misunderstanding would be mostly based on the idea that Wagner composed a certain body of music that represented characters, events, situations in the Ring, in the story of the Ring, and then sort of patched them together to make this great, wonderful quilt, which is the Ring des Nibelungen. And this is not the way it works. Motives are not these tags, or the great majority of them aren't anyway, these little musical tags that mean you hear this, it means this, you hear this, it means that. They are conceived rather as these very plastic, movable, changeable, protean little elements that are associated with things very strongly, but also change themselves, change their associations, change their meaning as the circumstances unfold. And indeed, from a musical standpoint, the wondrous unfolding of the Ring has to do, to a large extent, with the combinations and metamorphoses of these motivic elements. Nevertheless, in the first three Ring operas, most of the motivic material still retains a very strong specificity in terms of its dramatic association. Much, much more so than, let's say, in Tristan, or in Meistersinger, or in Parsifal. For instance, I don't know if any of you, like I, grew up with Tristan and had the little catalogs, like Lavignac, the early books on Tristan, as one had the early books on the Ring. And there would be these tables of motives. I'm sure you all remember these. And in Tristan, you always had the amazing situation of having a table of motives that would say, love's felicity, love's bliss, love's desire, love, on and on these lists of these really kind of totally nonsensical names, which had no basis really on anything except, well, it's kind of about love. Well, so is Tristan. Except for very few little bits of material in Tristan, or in Parsifal, to name two, the motives are not particularly connected in any specific way with things or events or characters. There is no Tristan motive, there is no Isolde motive. There is a Parsifal motive, but still, even in Parsifal, it's much less specific than in most of the Ring. In Götterdämmerung, however, the specificity of these motives changes enormously and becomes much less focused, and the use of motives becomes much more symbolic, or rather really metaphoric, than in the earlier operas. But this is entirely different from saying that Götterdämmerung uses the leitmotifs in the same way as Parsifal, which is the next work, does. And the reason it's different is because Götterdämmerung is the fruit of our experiences of the three previous works. In Parsifal, we never have the specificity of associations with the motivic material. We never hear these motives in such a way as that we say, aha, that's what the Rhine maidens sang when they told Alberich that whoever renounces love and can forge this gold into a ring, which will give him world power. Or, aha, that's what we heard when the Valkyries first came on stage. Or, aha, that's what we heard when Hunding first came on stage. Or, aha, that's what we heard when Siegmund and Sieglinde first looked at each other and love grew in their hearts, and we hear it in the solo cello, etc., etc., etc. In other words, this material that we hear is definitely established in our mind with strong and specific associations. However, it takes on different ones, or much more general, much more symbolic ones in Götterdämmerung.